The main reason that I don't own any new Jeeps always boils down to is the cost of the initial project. I cannot justify in my mind spending 25 to 30 grand or more on a project vehicle that you throw 90% of it away. I always gravitate towards, you know, like a $5,000 car or even a free vehicle that I can get and then just build from there. That's my comfort level. Yes, it's more work in the long run because you're literally starting with nothing. Sometimes it's just a body or sometimes it's just a windshield frame and a VIN plate. But for me, my brain wraps around it a lot simpler as saying, okay, well, I've only spent 500 bucks on this, so I can put $20,000 worth of parts in it, versus saying, oh, this truck only cost me 50 grand, I'll put another 20 grand in it. I just can't function that way. That's why I always end up with super cheap projects that always need a pile of work. The goal this week is super simple. I want a complete finished rolling chassis. I mean, I've got the axles, I've got tires and wheels. All I have to do is bolt my metal cloak suspension on and I'm ready to go. The suspension, it's nothing fancy. It's just a metal cloak 3.5-inch game changer kit. I've seen these on 4-door JKs perform incredibly well on the trail and on the road. So that's what I'm running on my wagon. For bump stops on this rig, I'm using these. They kind of look like air bump or like a bump can, except they use these little poly bushings inside. I like them because they're not that expensive. You don't have to charge them with nitrogen. And I've got them on a couple of my trail rigs and they work really well. They're certainly not good for go fast stuff, but they're good for just rock crawling stuff because it kind of allows a little bit of cushion when the axle hits the bump stop. The problem is I've welded these in place with that other truss system in here. The back one ended up being perfectly fine, but the front, I'm pretty sure I'm gonna have to move it up at least an inch, maybe 1.5 inches. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna chop these old mounts off, and then when I get the axle in here, I'll check it, and I'll get the height set perfectly, and then weld them back in. Brake package for this rig is pretty standard for 1-ton swaps. It's a set of Chevy 3/4 ton front 8-lug rotors and some single piston calipers. The wheel studs hold these rotors on to the actual rotor support in the back. Up front, I'm gonna have to slide in my custom RCV axle shafts before I install the brakes. And of course, I'm gonna finish this rig out with some Yukon hardcore freewheeling hubs. The steering I wanna run on this rig is definitely overkill, like a lot of the stuff that's on this frame so far. But if you remember, I have had this thing laying around the shop for like, I think 5-6 years now. And when I originally started pulling parts in for this project, my plan was to basically build a throwdown crawler and just leave the body kind of rat rod looking. And that's changed. But just because that's changed, I didn't want to pull any punches when it came to the drivetrain, the suspension. I still want something that's going to work really, really well off-road because I do still plan to wheel this thing, even if it's just light duty wheeling. So the steering, same thing. I'm going with a PSC big bore box with a ram assist ram. Now the big bore box on its own would easily be able to handle the 37-inch tall tires that I'm running on this rig, but if I ever wanted to step up to a larger wheel and tire combo at some point in time, like maybe a 40 or a 42, the ram assist will definitely come into play there. It's really simple because I'm using this JK frame. It's literally a bolt-on. Box bolts onto the frame, and then I already have the tabs on the axle for the ram assist kit, and then all I got to do is build a drag link and a tie rod. Well, this rolling chassis is done. You probably noticed that I didn't tighten any of the bolts, and I don't do that until the entire weight of the body is back on the frame. That way the joints won't be in a bind. If I tightened them when the suspension was hanging, when the suspension went to compress, it would actually bind the joint. So it's best to wait to do that. And also, there's no shocks in this suspension, and that's because I want to wait until the body is on here and the vehicle is pretty much 90% done. That way I can weigh it, and I can talk to my shock manufacturer and get a very good ballpark valving in this thing. If I just stuffed a set of JK shocks in here, they're not going to work because the weights are going to be all off. But I am super excited to see this thing off the lift, on its tires and wheels. It can roll around the shop now. This is a good day. We'll see you next time in the Big Tire Garage.